The art of being feared and loved at the same time, the paradox of perfect power. What if I told you that the most powerful people in history weren't those who chose between being feared or loved? They were the ones who transcended this false choice entirely by mastering something far more sophisticated. What if I told you that there's a psychological sweet spot where fear and love merge into something that creates absolute loyalty, magnetic attraction, and unshakable influence? Today, I'm going to reveal how to become the kind of person others simultaneously revere and respect, adore and admire. Someone whose approval feels like a gift and whose disapproval feels devastating. Here's the paradox that will revolutionize your understanding of power. True authority doesn't come from making people choose between loving you and fearing you. It comes from making them realize they can't afford to lose you. When someone becomes simultaneously indispensable and irreplaceable, when disappointing them feels worse than their anger, when their standards become your internal compass, that's when you've achieved the ultimate expression of human influence. Let me tell you about a man who embodied this principle so perfectly that 40 years after his death, grown adults still modify their behavior based on what they think he would have expected. His name was Vince Lombardi, the legendary football coach who transformed the Green Bay Packers from laughingstocks into champions. But Lombardi's real genius wasn't his tactical knowledge, it was his psychological mastery of what I call loving discipline. Lombardi's players didn't just respect him, they were psychologically addicted to earning his approval. He created an environment where his disappointment was more terrifying than his anger, where his rare praise was more valuable than any trophy. Players would run through walls for him, not because they feared punishment, but because they couldn't bear the thought of letting down someone who believed in their potential more than they believed in it themselves. This is the essence of perfect power. When people fear disappointing you more than they fear your retaliation, when your standards become their internal voice, when your approval becomes the measuring stick for their self-worth. This isn't manipulation, it's the natural result of being someone whose judgment is consistently superior to their own. The psychological foundation of this power lies in what I call earned authority. Unlike positional authority, which comes from titles and hierarchies, earned authority comes from consistent demonstration of superior judgment, unwavering standards, and genuine investment in others' success. When someone repeatedly proves that following their guidance leads to better outcomes than following your own instincts, they develop gravitational influence over your decision-making. But here's what most people miss about this dynamic. The fear component isn't fear of punishment. It's fear of separation. When someone becomes essential to your growth, your success, and your sense of possibility, losing their investment in you becomes the ultimate consequence. They don't need to threaten you because the natural consequences of disappointing them are worse than any punishment they could impose. The love component isn't affection, it's gratitude mixed with admiration. When someone consistently pushes you to become better than you thought possible, when they see potential in you that others miss, when they invest their excellence in your development, you don't just like them, you become grateful for their existence in your life. Here's how this manifests in real relationships. Think about the most influential person you've ever known. Not the most popular or the most feared, but the one whose opinion actually shaped your choices. I guarantee they had this quality. They simultaneously made you feel valued and challenged. They celebrated your successes genuinely, but they also called out your self-deceptions ruthlessly. They supported your dreams, but they refused to enable your excuses. This person created what psychologists call secure attachment with high standards. You felt safe to be vulnerable around them because you knew they were invested in your success, but you also felt motivated to bring your best self because you knew they wouldn't accept less. They became your internal compass, not through force or manipulation, but through consistent demonstration that their judgment was worth trusting. Now let's break down the neuroscience of why this combination is so psychologically powerful. When someone simultaneously activates your attachment system, love, and your achievement system, fear of disappointment, they create a neurochemical cocktail that's incredibly addictive. You get oxytocin from feeling cared for and dopamine from pursuing their approval. The result is what researchers call motivated attachment. You become emotionally bonded to someone who also drives you to excel. The practical application of this principle will transform every relationship in your life. Instead of trying to be liked or trying to be respected, focus on becoming someone whose investment in others is so valuable that losing it feels devastating. This requires mastering what I call conditional, unconditional love. You care about people's highest potential unconditionally, but your approval and energy are conditional on their effort to reach that potential. Here's how this looks in practice. When someone you care about is living below their potential, you don't attack their character or threaten consequences. Instead, you express disappointment in the situation while maintaining faith in their capabilities. I know you're capable of so much more than this. Hits harder than you're being lazy because it comes from love rather than judgment, but it still creates pressure to change. When someone succeeds, you don't just celebrate the outcome. You acknowledge the character growth that made the outcome possible. "I'm proud of how hard you worked for this" is more powerful than "congratulations" because it reinforces the behaviors that created success while making your approval feel earned rather than automatic. The key is understanding what I call strategic emotional investment. You don't give your best energy to everyone equally. You invest it where it will create the most growth and where it's most appreciated. This isn't about being cold or calculating. It's about understanding that your emotional energy is a finite resource that should be allocated strategically. This connects to one of the most powerful concepts in influence psychology: the scarcity of high standards. Most people in someone's life will accept mediocrity from them, make excuses for their bad choices, and enable their self-destructive patterns. When you become the rare person who consistently expects excellence while providing the support to achieve it, you become irreplaceable. But here's the sophisticated part. Your standards must be applied to yourself first and most rigorously. People can sense authenticity immediately. If you demand excellence from others while accepting mediocrity from yourself, you become a hypocrite rather than a leader. But if your standards for yourself are visibly higher than your standards for others, your expectations feel like invitations to join you at a higher level, rather than judgments from an ivory tower. Let's explore how this applies to different types of relationships. In romantic relationships, this dynamic creates what I call growthful attraction. Your partner doesn't just love you, they're inspired by you. They don't just fear losing you, they fear disappointing someone who believes in their potential. You become not just their lover, but their favorite version of themselves. In professional relationships, this creates what I call voluntary accountability. Your colleagues and subordinates don't just follow your instructions, they anticipate your standards. They don't just avoid making mistakes, they actively pursue excellence because they know you'll notice and appreciate the effort. You become not just their boss, but their benchmark for professional excellence. In friendships, this creates what I call aspirational loyalty. Your friends don't just enjoy your company, they value your perspective. They don't just avoid letting you down, they actively seek opportunities to make you proud. You become not just their friend, but their conscience and their inspiration. The meditation practice that develops this magnetic authority is what I call loving standards visualization. Every morning, spend 5 minutes imagining yourself as someone whose approval is precious because it's earned, whose disappointment is devastating because it's rare, and whose investment in others is transformative because it's genuine. Feel what it's like to operate from love that demands excellence rather than love that enables mediocrity. Now, let's address the potential for misuse. This kind of influence is incredibly powerful, which means it can be incredibly destructive if applied without wisdom and genuine care. The difference between beneficial influence and psychological manipulation comes down to motivation. Are you developing these abilities to serve your ego or to serve others' growth? Are you seeking power over people or power to help people become their best selves? The healthy version of this dynamic always includes what I call growth-oriented detachment. You're invested in someone's success, but you're not attached to controlling how they achieve it. You have standards, but you're willing to lose people who consistently choose mediocrity over growth. You care deeply, but you don't enable dependency or dysfunction. This brings us to what I call the paradox of loving leadership. The more genuinely you care about someone's highest potential, the more willing you must be to let them experience the consequences of not pursuing it. Real love sometimes requires saying no, setting boundaries, and allowing people to feel the natural results of their choices. This isn't cruelty, it's the only way to create sustainable growth and genuine respect. The ultimate expression of this power is what I call transformational presence. You become someone whose very existence in people's lives raises their standards, clarifies their values, and motivates their growth, not through preaching or demanding, but through consistently modeling excellence while genuinely investing in others' potential to achieve their own version of excellence. Here's your challenge for the next 30 days. Identify one relationship where you currently choose between being supportive or being challenging. Maybe you're too accommodating with a friend who's stuck in destructive patterns, or too demanding with a colleague who needs more encouragement. Practice combining high standards with high support. Express disappointment in situation while maintaining faith in people. Celebrate character growth as enthusiastically as you celebrate achievements. Focus on becoming someone whose investment in others is so valuable that losing it feels devastating, but whose care is so genuine that earning it feels achievable. Make your approval precious by making it rare and meaningful. Make your disappointment powerful by making it about wasted potential rather than personal failure. Remember, the goal isn't to control people through fear and love. It's to become so valuable to their growth that they voluntarily align themselves with your standards. When you master this art, you don't need to choose between being feared and being loved, because people will fear disappointing someone they love, and love someone whose expectations make them better. The most elegant form of power is when people thank you for having high standards for them, when they credit you for helping them become someone they're proud to be, when they seek your approval, not because they need your validation, but because they value your judgment. That's when you realize that true authority isn't about making people choose between fearing you and loving you. It's about becoming someone they can't imagine their best life without. The question is, are you ready to become irreplaceable?